Hey guys, Aaronoticz here, and this is gonna be my spoiler review of Spider-Man Far From Home. Now, if you've seen my non-spoiler review, you would know that I absolutely loved this film. I had a fantastic time in the cinema, and it's worth every cent of money that you pay for to watch it. I even called it virtually flawless at one point. This film probably ranks around the top 5 best MCU films in my book. There's Infinity War, Thor Ragnarok, Iron Man 1, Endgame, and Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one. Okay, that's 6, but it's definitely in that mix. So to understand my thoughts, let's break down the film and tell you why I love this film and why I think this film is so great. But before I do that, I want to do a quick recap, a bit of a synopsis on the film. If you want to skip this part, just go to the timestamp that is shown somewhere in the video. Somewhere right there. I don't know. Future me will put it up. Let's get started. Spider-Man Far From Home starts with a bit of a recap on what happened in Avengers Endgame. They explain a bit about the snap. It's called the blip in this film, I think. And they establish where everybody is at this point in time. Most of the cast in the first Spider-Man film were blipped. No, wait. All of them were blipped. A bit convenient if you ask me. So Spider-Man for some reason is like the last Avenger, since Tony and Black Widow died, and Cap got old, and Thor's out of planet, and Hawkeye's probably with his family. Banner's probably recovering from, his injuries in Endgame. Wanda's grieving? And Falcon and Bucky are probably out there 69 somewhere in the world. I don't know, man. For some reason, he's the last Avenger on Earth, and people keep bringing it up in this film. So he's sick of it, right? And rightfully so. He's afraid of the responsibility that was trusted upon him and the massive expectations he has to fulfill, and he just wants a bit of time for himself. A vacation, to get his mind off of things. But he's Spider-Man. Trouble follows him. He's Spider-Man. And after ghosting Nick Fury, he goes on his class trip to Europe with his classmates and this asshat named Brad. And in that trip, Peter decides to confess his love to good old MJ. The problem is that it becomes a bit complicated for him to do so. Because of elemental monsters that keep popping up wherever he goes, MJ finding out he's Spider-Man, Brad catching Peter naked with a foreign chick, and a psycho out to kill them all. Typical European class trip. No big deal. But let's go back a bit, alright? So the first place they visit is in Venice, where the water elemental shows up and wreaks havoc in the city. Mysterio also shows up trying to combat the monster, and this becomes Peter and Mysterio's first meeting with each other. Long story short, Mysterio kills the water monster while Peter saves civilian lives. Like he usually does. Then Nick Fury shows up in Peter's room later that night and takes him to meet his crew and briefs him of the situation. It turns out that Mysterio is a man by the name of Quentin Beck, and he's from a parallel universe and is here to prevent the destruction of this universe's Earth by the hands of the elementals. Creatures that sadly destroyed his own Earth and killed his whole family. Oh, and Fury also gives Peter these glasses equipped with AI that Tony made for him before he died. It has access to all databases of Stark Industry, and remember that fact because it's gonna be a key factor later on. Fury asks for Peter's help, stopping the fire elemental that is gonna show up in Prague, and Peter declines. Because he just wants his vacation time, man. But Fury hijacks his class trip and sends everybody to Prague. Yes, Nick Fury sends a bunch of kids to Prague knowing full well the danger he's putting them in. Yeah, that's not morally questionable at all. So on the way to Prague, Brad stumbles upon Peter getting naked with a foreign chick because she ordered him to try out his new suit, and because of this we have a whole thing with Peter accidentally calling a drone strike on Brad. But don't worry, Brad's a dick, alright? It's fine. So they go to Prague. Peter and Mysterio face off against the fire elemental and they beat it. Mysterio almost dies, but he doesn't. He survives, and Peter and Beck have this nice mentor and student moment, and Peter gives Beck Edith, the glasses Tony Stark entrusted to him because Peter believed at that time that Quentin Beck was the hero that was going to be the next Iron Man. Yeah, it totally wasn't because he was running away from his responsibilities or anything. It had nothing to do with that. So he gets back to the hotel and him and MJ decide to talk. There, MJ reveals to Peter that the only reason why she was interested in Peter was because she thought he was Spider-Man. Which is true, of course. It is true. But Peter is hurt by this and, denies the claim But before we get into a whole sappy storyline, something happens. You know the fight earlier with the fire monster? Well, the thing is, while Peter was fighting the monster, he unintentionally destroyed a piece of the hologram machine that Mysterio was using to create the illusion of it. And MJ got a hold of it and it randomly activated for Peter and MJ to bear witness. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't tell you yet? Oh, my bad. Okay. So it turns out that all the things that Mysterio said was a big pile of bullshit. He's actually just a former Stark Industries employee that is out to get revenge on Stark after naming his creation, the illusion tech, Fart. You know, because Tony's funny and all. Alongside a few other unappreciative former Stark Industries employees, they concocted this whole thing because they wanted their hands on Edith, the AI that has access to all database of Stark Industries. I mean, it's a very well concocted plan, I'm not gonna lie. That's bordering just a bit into psychotic territory. Just a little bit. They even have directors and scriptwriters into it, and they rehearse everything to perfection. Like, dude, this was a classy scheme. They were using drones to replicate the damages sustained by the illusion to make things hella realistic. Like, the illusion wasn't real, obviously, but the damage being done was. So Mysterio finds out about Peter and MJ finding out about Mysterio's illusion thing. And Peter connects the dots in the fact that he just gave an extremely advanced artificial intelligence with access to all of Stark Industries' databases to a psychopath. So he tells MJ the truth, packs up and heads to Berlin to tell Fury about Mysterio. So he gets to Berlin, but instead of meeting Fury there, Mysterio dupes Peter into revealing who he told about Beck's deception, which consisted of MJ, Ned, and possibly Ned's girlfriend. And then Mysterio tries to kill Peter. And the problem with fighting a villain that can create flawless illusions is that, well, you just can't tell which one's real and which one's not. And after a very impressive display of filmmaking and CGI magic, Peter gets hit by a speeding train. Oof. That's gotta hurt. He wakes up in a jail cell in the Netherlands, badly hurt. He contacts Happy and he flies a jet to pick him up. They figure out where Beck is gonna be through Flash's dreams, and they fly there. There is this touching moment between Happy and Peter where Happy is reminded of Tony when he sees Peter building his own suit as they fly from the Netherlands to London. It was a beautiful and touching moment. And when Happy played the Back in Black AC/DC song, which was Iron Man's theme in the first film, it made me tear up a bit. So Happy and Peter arrive at London where Mysterio is now conducting his biggest illusion yet. Using Edith, he combines all 4 elemental monsters and wreaks havoc in London as a cover to kill Fury and Peter's classmates. Long story short, Happy warns Fury about Beck, Peter gains control over Edith back from Mysterio, and he gets killed by a misfired drone gunshot. Peter saves London and therefore his classmates, and they go back to New York. All's well that ends well. Peter and MJ are now dating. Ned and his girl who became a couple during the trip have split up, and Flash is neglected by his parents once again. Brad's wherever the fuck he is and everything's back to normal. Not completely. In the mid-credit scene of the film, Mysterio, as a final fuck you to Peter, reveals to the world his true identity and manipulates the masses by making them think that it was Spider-Man who caused the destruction in London and killed Mysterio, maintaining the illusion of Mysterio being the ultimate hero. Of course, all of this is reported by longtime fan favorite J. Jonah Jameson, played by the icon himself, J.K. Simmons. And in the post-credit scene, it reveals to us that Fury and Hill were actually Talos and his wife, the Skrulls that first appeared in Captain Marvel, and that the real Fury was on a spaceship out of the planet the whole time, essentially teasing, I don't know exactly, a war of some sort. Marvel comic fans will probably know. So yeah, that's about everything that happens in the film. So now, let's break it down. If you didn't know, I was trying like hip-hop moves. I called the film virtually flawless, but I mean, all good films have 1 or 2 bad elements to them, and this film did have something that I feel like they weren't able to actually do justice. So Spider-Man Far From Home is basically a direct sequel to Avengers Endgame, and that's where it kinda has a bit of a problem there. I don't know, man, because after Avengers Endgame, I wanted to see more of what happens to this world now right? Like, what's the consequence of Avengers Endgame? What impact does that film have with the MCU moving forward? And it didn't really give us much to work with. And Spider-Man Far From Home being the first film after Avengers Endgame, it was kind of just very disappointing that they never showed us that, because essentially all of the cast in Spider-Man Homecoming, they were blipped. There wasn't really a need to kind of explore the idea of that, right? Like, there was this one character, Brad, who was blipped, but it was like, it wasn't really, he wasn't really focused upon, or like the blip itself, I feel like wasn't really focused upon. We just kind of like, oh, we'll reset the things after this, and like, just 5 years have passed, you know, your little brother is now like the same age as you, older than you, so like something like that. But it kind of makes things feel a bit cheaper, right? Kind of makes Avengers Endgame feel a bit cheaper. I just wanted the film to kind of explore the impact and the consequence of the blip, and not just tell us. I wish the film kind of would have focused more, or at least shown us a bit more of the impact of the blip and what it means to these people. But instead, we just kind of hear stories, hearsays from it, and it's kind of disappointing. You know, like, a lot of people were speculating that because they tampered with time and they went back and changed a few things, that the multiverse was created, and that's where Mysterio came from, because that was a whole thing with Mysterio in the trailers, and that didn't happen, because obviously Mysterio was lying his ass off. Because even the world in Avengers Endgame didn't feel as different, really, right? Like, it didn't feel like 5 years had just passed of people just gone like that. The places that they visited didn't have like any semblance of the blip ever happening. It just was kind of disappointing. Yeah, and that's the one thing that I think Spider-Man Far From Home didn't actually do well. One thing that I could say, one of the criticisms that I could say about this film. But if you look past it, I think you still have an amazing, amazing film. So Spider-Man Far From Home was funny as hell. It was really fun. I think it's up there with films like Guardians of the Galaxy and Ragnarok in terms of comedy, in terms of humor. Like, don't get me wrong, I think Guardians of the Galaxy and Ragnarok are far more comedy films. But I think in terms of just having a fun time, you know, experiencing it, I think it's within that same realm. And the road trip aspect of it was really fun. We got to see like different places. We got to see a lot of different dynamics from characters. It was really, really fun, and it kind of reminded me of films of its nature, other films that tackle like road trip films, fun road trip films that I've seen in the past. It's like those fun road trip films that you watch with your family, but there's like actions and Spider-Man doing Spider-Man-y things. It was really, really one heck of a fun time. And as a film that follows Avengers Endgame and the tone of that film, I think tonally this film is like the perfect follow-up to Avengers Endgame tonally. I think it was like the right call to make this film really fun and be really lighthearted following Avengers Endgame. Like, a lot of the jokes really, really landed. Like, Ned specifically was funny as hell. And his whole thing with his girlfriend was like, like every time they kind of like focus on that, I was like laughing my ass off. And then, you know, just getting to see more of the dynamic between Ned and Peter was also really fun. And then the hilarious antics that Peter gets into was really fun to watch. The action set pieces of this film, they were really, really visually impressive. A lot of the fights, they were they looked amazing, and the cinematography and the shot selections and even the use of CG was really impressive. And I said before, like, when they showed the power sets for Mysterio and Spider-Man, it was like, I was like so fucking down with it. Like, especially when I get to see like when they showed Mysterio like flying, when you see him floating and then using his powers and then fighting the elementals, like, they were really, it looks so fucking cool. But especially Spider-Man feats. The Spider-Man feats in this film were really some of the best highlights of this film. Every time Peter was Spider-Manning, it was just really one hell of a time. They're really memorable. Like, in past films, Spider-Man doing like Spider-Man things, they were cool to to look at, right? But they weren't really that memorable. Like if you go back to the past, like Spider-Man films, I mean, there's like one or two moments in just Spider-Man doing his thing that you kind of remember. Like for example, in Spider-Man 2, the one scene in that film that I think a lot of people just kind of just remember is, you know, Spider-Man stopping the train, which was really an emotional moment, but I think a lot of people kind of remember that for the emotional value that it had. But this film is like different. Like there were so many things that that they were able to pull off that I'm like, wow, that just looks amazing. For example, in Venice, I think, like the first place that they visited and where the water elemental appeared, like as Mysterio was drawing it to the other side of the city, far away from the canals, it was obviously destroying like buildings and blocks, and there was like one moment where Spider-Man just enters a building, he smashes into a building, inside the building he like shoots his web, right? He's propelled through the windows up into like the roof of it, and then from the rooftop he enters, and then he just does his like Spider-Man thing to keep it in place. Or in like the final battle, like in London, where it's like he uses the drones, right? And he makes a kind of makes like his own slingshot, and he uses it to slingshot himself to destroy the drones. Like those are things that it made like the action set pieces of this film really, really interesting and really, really amazing. And it's probably one of the more consistent films in the MCU in terms of like action set pieces. Responsibility is like a major theme in this film. A lot of it is dedicated towards showing Peter finally accepting the role that he's been given. A lot of the things that Peter does in this film is because he just doesn't want the responsibility. And I get it, I understand it, but you're still Spider-Man and you still need to carry this responsibility. I think at the end of this film, Peter is no longer just a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Like in the first film, the way that the first film ended, it was kind of very self-contained. So it felt more in line with the whole Spider-Man being a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. But I think in this film, the final set piece, it was big, it was Avengers level threat, and I think it was in line with Peter finally taking up the responsibility that he was given, that was thrust upon him. Also, the one thing that I loved about this film is how they showed the Peter and Tony relationship. Tony is basically the one that recruited Spider-Man. He was the one who brought him into this whole universe thing, with Civil War. And there's like this attachment to it. Like they really formed this relationship with each other that at first I wasn't really that into it. It's not like I didn't like it, it's just I felt like it kind of took away a lot from Spider-Man. Like for example, the suit. He was given the suit by Tony, right? And the suit had like many functions and gadgets and many things that like it's Stark operated, right? At first I didn't quite like the suit because Spider-Man was never really about the suit. But obviously in that film they use it as a tool to show Spider-Man's growth. And I just never really thought like the Tony and Peter relationship would go like this far. It's just very interesting how the Tony and Peter relationship has evolved throughout these films. And now that Tony's dead, and you kind of feel like this film really does a great job of showing you what Tony meant for Peter. There was this one scene in this film that was just very touching with Happy and Peter, where Happy sees Tony in Peter where he was like making his suit, and like it was really like a really touching scene, touching moment that I was like happy that they did. And obviously like Stark's legacy, lives on in Peterman, and obviously Stark's legacy lives on in Spider-Man. The Peter and MJ relationship in this film is one of the things that really elevated this film. I've always been a huge fan of like romance, and I've always loved the genre of romance. But in the MCU, a lot of the relationships, they're not really that interesting. A lot of them are just tolerable. But Peter and MJ in this film was just the best. The portrayal of like teenage romance was like really relatable in some sense. Like the very awkward Peter Parker was really relatable in this film. Even though he's Spider-Man and he saves the world and all that, like he still can't get to this girl and still can't honestly say to this girl how he feels. There's something about that is like really relatable. One of my favorite like Peter and MJ moments in this film was the airplane scene where as they were leaving for the trip, Peter wanted to, sit next to MJ, but obviously that didn't go down well. So like what happens was that MJ and Brad was kind of like sitting together and he was stuck with his teacher. So he goes into the bathroom, does his thing there, and as he comes out, he sees MJ. And immediately he goes back and he's like fixes everything. Like he wipes away the pee from the toilet, and then he like fixes his hair in the mirror, just looking all cool, trying to look all cool and manly. And then he comes out and she wasn't there anymore and said it was Brad. That scene was really, really funny, but also very, very relatable. Like, we all were Peter at some point in our lives. But yeah, the film just did a great job setting up this whole Peter and MJ relationship, making us, the viewers, care for them and care for this relationship, not just shoving it in our faces and expecting us to care for it, even though they didn't deserve it. But Peter and MJ relationship was just so good in this film that I feel like their kiss at the end of the film, towards the end of the film, felt so very rewarding because of just how well it was set up and how well it was established and how well it was shown. Plus, this film made me fall in love with Zendaya. Like, it really did. Like, in Homecoming, she was cool and all, but I didn't really care much. Like, the reveal at the end that she was MJ, I was like, oh, cool, she's MJ. Alright, I'll see where it goes. But even in like other films, I didn't really care much about Zendaya. Even in The Greatest Showman, where she and Zac Efron like had this like whole relationship thing, I didn't really care much. But this film really made me fall in love with her. Every time I see Zendaya, I'm reminded of like MJ from Spider-Man Far From Home, and I'm like, it made me fall in love with Zendaya. Okay, this film made me fall in love with Zendaya. Jake Gyllenhaal in this film is most definitely the MVP. His performance as Mysterio, just gold. Because like Mysterio in this film is like terrifying. He was, but he's not. He wasn't terrifying in the very conventional way, right? Like he wasn't Michael B. Jordan in Black Panther or Hela from Thor Ragnarok. Like he wasn't terrifying in those manner. He was terrifying in a very like different way, because like in this film he was very convincing as a hero. It was terrifying how trustworthy he is. The moments with him and Peter, they were really convincing. There's just something terrifying about a guy that is like acts nice and is actually genuinely, that you actually feel is genuinely nice, and then he just turns. And when he turns evil or he shows like evil tendencies, there's still this nice aura to him that's like very creepy. And then when he blurts out like these very psychopathic and immoral things, like for example killing potentially hundreds and millions of people, he still has this like nice aura to him that's like even makes it more terrifying and creepy. There's just something truly horrifying with a villain that is convincing as a hero. Like he genuinely feels like he's a nice guy, and obviously he's not. He's a psychopath, because his like reasoning, his goal, they weren't necessarily understandable. It wasn't like Thanos where we can understand the reasoning behind the things that he does in the film. It's just, imagining being with a guy like that, it's just very terrifying. And he has like one of the best foreshadowing in any supervillain that I've seen so far in the MCU. And what I'm referring to is Edith, the glasses that Tony Stark made for Peter. Because if you didn't watch the film, if you don't know, Edith stands for Even Dead, I'm the Hero. Which was kind of funny when it's first revealed, because that is so like Tony. That is so in line with Tony's character. But then you realize at the end of the film that it's actually a very cool foreshadowing of Mysterio himself. Even Dead, I'm the Hero is basically describing what Mysterio did at the mid-credit scenes of the film, where he set up Peter as a villain and manipulated everybody into thinking that he was still the hero, even when he was dead. He was such a perfectionist and controlling and manipulative that even in his death, even when he was dead, he was still controlling everybody. One of the more goosebumps-worthy lines that he said in the film was something along the lines of, I decide what to show to the people. Something along those lines. And he was saying it when Peter was foiling his plans, and everything was going downhill. He said that. You know, when you hear it, it's like it's a cool line being said by a villain that is gonna be beaten, but then you look back and it's just so menacing. He did exactly that. At the end of the film, he made everybody see what he wanted to show. Even dead, I'm the hero. But also, what is up with Marvel and villains? At the beginning of the MCU, one of the most prominent criticisms is that the villains, they were very subpar. They were just the heroes, but evil. But then these past few films really showed us like some of the MCU's greatest villains. I mean, we have Hela from Thor Ragnarok, we have Thanos from Avengers Endgame and Infinity War. We had Killmonger from Black Panther. There's like the Vulture in Spider-Man Homecoming. And then obviously Mysterio from Spider-Man Far From Home. But the crazy thing is that it introduces great villains and then it kills them at the end. Like, what is up with the MCU and these villains, man? Like, Thanos is dead. Hela is dead. Killmonger is dead. And even Jake Gyllenhaal, Mysterio is dead. Like, the only one good fucking villain that is still alive is Vulture. And it's just crazy. Like, what is your problem with villains, Marvel? Easily, the mid-credit scene of this film, easily one of the best post-credit scenes of the MCU. I mean, aside from the big bombshell and big tease for Spider-Man 3, we had the return of longtime fan favorite J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson. Like that was such a nice surprise at the end. Like, it really was. But that mid-credit scene was a big thing. I mean, now everybody knows who Spider-Man is. Like, Peter can't hide anymore, and he's also made out to be the villain. So I don't know what happens in Spider-Man 3. It's I'm very excited and very hyped for Spider-Man 3. What could they do with that? What happens now? I'm excited for Spider-Man 3, I really am. Also, there's the final tease with like Fury and all. I'm like, it was a cool moment, don't get me wrong, but I just don't know what it means. Like, there's a war of some sort coming. Secret Wars? It can't be Secret Wars, because the Skrulls in this universe are good. So what could it be? Like, maybe a Kree invasion? I don't know, but either way, it's there. And Marvel comic book fans out there, if you know what it's teasing, let me know in the comment section. Spider-Man Far From Home, for me, broke a lot of expectations. It was an amazing film. It was really fucking fun. It was really great. And as a direct sequel to Endgame, it's pretty good. I wish they could have focused more on the blip and what it means for that film and what it means for the MCU moving forward. But hey, you can't have it all. But to the people that were on the fritz with the MCU and was kind of like sick of the MCU, this film is, I feel like, a wake-up call, right? Like, yeah, you can't do that. No. Marvel still has some big plans coming up ahead. And honestly, if this is the future of the MCU, if this is what we're gonna get moving forwards, I'm excited. I really am, because Far From Home was such a great film. If this is what we're getting, something along the lines of Far From Home, I don't care if the MCU never fucking stops. I don't care if the MCU goes on for an eternity. I don't give a shit. I am going to be a fan of it. So yeah, Kevin Feige and Marvel did a great job, and I guess MCU for life. So yeah, that's what I thought about the film. I enjoyed it very much, and if you enjoyed this video, leave a like, share, and subscribe. This was Aaronoticz, blasting off. Peace.